to the fourth and final session of our Communities of Belonging Learning series with our host, Michael Jones. In this series of generative conversations, Michael and his conversation partners offer us a richly textured and multidisciplinary examination of place. Throughout these conversations, we're reminded that too often the places we create remain placeless because they do not include our stories. Today's session is entitled Transformative Celebration, the Commons and Thrivability, and Michael has invited special guests Tolu Ilisame, Michelle Holliday, and Ben Wolf to join him. I'd like to welcome the host of the Communities of Belonging series, Michael Jones, to the session today. We are just so fortunate to have Michael as one of our Tamarack thought leaders. Michael is a leadership educator, widely recognized pianist, composer, and conversation catalyst who has been convening forums on the soul of placemaking, beginning with the support of the Banff Center in 2010. Michael is also the author of The Soul of Place, Reimagining Leadership Through Nature, Art, and Community, which explores how our relationship with place deepens our connection with the core energetic patterns that form the undercurrents of life. I'd also like to welcome our special guests for today's session, Tolu Ilisame, Michelle Holliday, and Ben Wolf. Drawn to what he calls the other side of cleaning, Tolu chose to become a cleaner straight from business school at McGill after spending years in banking in Nigeria. He started by cleaning homes and offices throughout his company, Zenith Cleaning, and continues to do cleaning as a deeply transformational practice. His life and work focuses on cleaning as a deep practice, metaphor, and a framework for individual, organizational, and societal transformation. Tolu speaks regularly at conferences and schools within and outside Canada. He's a regular guest teacher at McGill University and has been a visiting scholar at Columbia University. Michelle Holliday is a facilitator, organizational consultant, researcher, presenter, and writer. Her work centers around Thrivability, a set of perspectives, intentions, and practices based on a view of organizations and communities as living systems. To this end, she brings people together and helps them discover ways they can feel more alive, connect more meaningfully with each other, and serve life more powerfully through their work. This generally takes the form of designing and hosting transformative events, as well as delivering talks and workshops. Her research is summarized in a slideshow called Humanity 4.0, as well as in a TEDx presentation. Her website can be found at www.cambriumconsulting.com. Though she's originally from the US, Michelle lives in Montreal with her husband, 2 children, 1 dog, and 2 cats. Ben Wolf is a local, regional, and national award-winning community builder and communicator whose current work is focused on placemaking, transformative dialogue, and renewed citizenship. He is co-founder of many community initiatives, including Green Up, that's Central and Eastern Ontario's leading organization focused on issues of environmental education, sustainability, and stewardship. Now it's in its 24th year. Most recently, Peterborough Dialogues, a pioneering local initiative in community building, learning, media making, and change. His writing about emergent ways of creating and cultivating community has appeared at Axiom News, Newscoop YYC, Abundant Community, and elsewhere. His professional work includes art of hosting practice, photography, nimble use of technology, and poetry as a tool for discovery and social change. Ben is past director of communications of local and national nonprofits, including the Canadian Unitarian Council. So, Michael, I'll pass that over to you. Thank you so much, and I'll let you guys begin your conversation. Thanks for joining us today.
Great, thanks, Devin, and thank you to all of you who are joining us for our webinar broadcast today. I'm delighted to have Ben and Michelle and Tolu with me in this conversation. As you can hear from their background and experience, each of them have many wonderful insights to share with us today, and we're going to discover those really through the conversation that we have. It's been said that if you want to transform your community, paint a bit bigger picture and throw a bigger party. And in fact, festivals and celebration may be one of the most effective ways of regenerating local place-based economies. What would change if we were to introduce a spirit of aliveness and transformative celebration as the lifeblood of our community? We have much to celebrate as we witness the movement towards building local, living, place-based economies that are both regenerative and respectful and celebratory of the places we find ourselves. Together, these are contributing towards creating a sense of belonging and inclusiveness, the ground on which a regenerative new economy can thrive. An essential aspect of bringing about this transformation includes seeing our community as a commons, a form of economy that is based not only on sustainability, but upon thrivability, through recognizing how people's gifts and uniqueness contribute to the health of the ecosystems that underlie it. In doing so, we discovered that the lifeblood of every community is the vibrancy and health of the public life, rooted in the work of craft and the joyful celebration of making things. The love we share through building, designing, crafting, inventing, conceiving, incubating, prototyping, and creating living spaces together opens opportunities for our communities to co-evolve through engaging our minds, our hearts, and our hands. So today we'll be exploring several themes, including what would shift in our worldview if we focus not only on sustainability, but on thrivability. That is, by not only basing it on conserving what we have left, but on generating something new that's never existed before. And I'm inviting Michelle to share some of her reflections on that with us. And also what would change if we engage in our work as both craft and practice, something to which we bring a spirit of joyful celebration. And I'll be inviting Tolu to share some of his reflections with us in that as part of our conversation as well. And a third part of our focus is what would change if we created a commons in our communities, a form of public space and a place where we can gather together that recognizes our gifts and possibilities and unique contributions as well as our needs. And I'll be calling on Ben to share some of his reflections with us in that area as well. I think to begin, I'd like each of my guests to share just briefly sort of what's most exciting for you right now as you think about what's emerging and what's developing as we shift more towards these local place-based economies. What are the possibilities you're seeing from your experience and your reflections, and what more do you think may be possible? Michelle, could you start us off, and then we'll just have a way of hearing each of our voices as we begin to move into our conversation together.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. It's really wonderful to be on this call with all of you, with my friends. I don't know that we've shared that background, that all of us are friends as well as colleagues and thinking partners together. So your question was, what excites me the most as I witness this shift towards a place-based local economy, and there's just so much. I think in my introduction, Devin explained that I come from the U.S., though I live in Canada now, and my husband calls it the United States of Generica. And really, I think this has hit Canada as well. We're not immune from it here, that there are so many places that are soulless and characterless. You could be anywhere. You don't really have a sense of place. So growing up in many places like that, it's hard not to feel generic yourself. So I'm excited to see a real shift away from that in many places all over the world. And one of the things that stands out, a small thing, but it's bigger than it appears, is just the language that we use. I'm hearing more and more new vocabulary like place and placemaking and the commons and even commoning, the language of local living economies and generativity, thrivability. These are terms that weren't considered valid in conversations about economics, about economies 10 and 20 years ago. So it's exciting that we're able to use these new words, and that shows us how much we are painting a bigger picture, as you said, Michael, so that we can throw a better party. We really can't imagine that bigger picture without the language to describe it, without the concepts to imagine what more is possible. So just the language alone is exciting. And then as I see how the bigger picture is being lived out, I'm really excited at how much diversity there is, that there's a spirit of prototyping and playfulness and improvisation that I think is really characteristic of life. Life improvises, and play is one of the core characteristics that defines us as mammals, and both of those, improvising and play. And and beauty were absent in the story that we're moving away from. So I'm excited to see how much different communities and different people are finding ways to express their gifts based on the place where they find themselves and how it shapes them, how it shapes their shared story, and how it shapes each of us as individuals. And I'm excited to see how all of us come together to help people come alive with their own possibilities. So you really see, I see in many different communities a sense of greater aliveness and potential and joy and thriving, really. So lots to be excited about.
Wow, that's lovely. Thank you.
Sure.
Thinking that a generic world is also a disenchanted world, and what I'm hearing in your languaging is a way of re-enchanting our world again through beauty, through aliveness, through play.
Exactly.
And through a more embodied language that is itself a source of enchantment. Now, Tolu, I know that you've been enchanting people through cleaning. It's fascinating, and how cleaning itself can be a craft. And what is it that excites you about that? And what possibilities are you seeing?
Yeah, thank you, Michael, and thank you for inviting me to this session. I mean, I'm very excited about many things happening around cleaning. Many things happening around these shifts that we're witnessing. I mean, the first thing that came to mind is that we're noticing more, we're paying more attention, and talking about being local, being place-based. For me, it has to do with how can we becoming more present in the here and now, and seeing more than what we're looking at, you know. And that happened to me. For me, with cleaning, is I'm looking at cleaning as a kind of place, but also just seeing it as much more than what I'm looking at as this chore kind of thing, but seeing the beauty in it. So how can we, the fact that we're moving more towards seeing beauty, even when we may be looking at ugliness, we're moving more towards just being present with each other. You know, the idea of local for me is being here now. But it's not just witnessing and noticing what's happening around us, but it's noticing what's happening within us and being at home with our inner experience, our inner world, you know, which is leading us to see things differently. So, I mean, for example, to see things like cleaning differently, and to be able to represent it in a way that connects with everything else, you know. And I'm excited that, you know, where, like Michelle said, our language is shifting. So we're coming back, I think, to what is timeless and always true. You know, we're using more elemental languages, you know, like place, you know, rootedness, you know, and realizing that these, it's like these are fundamentals that we can hold on to regardless of our advancements in technology and all. And so, for example, using the cleaning metaphor, it connects with everyone, and every one of us can relate to it. In the past, you know, what has a cleaner got to do with a business conference? But now, a cleaner can speak to a group of MBAs, a group of executives, and use a cleaning metaphor, because it's a very fundamental metaphor that has to do with how we engage in place. When we're in a place, we seek to make that place comfortable. We seek to care for it. So we are all understanding that. So, so there are many things that are exciting for me. It's this shift into what is elemental, this opening of our hearts to beauty in everything that we see around us and within us too.
That's wonderful. I was thinking, I was at a college in the in England just a few weeks back, and And what they're saying is what we need to have in the country is a craft revolution. We need to reinstill the value of craft, of working with our hands, of celebrating our work through seeing what we do as a craft and a practice. And anything, in a sense, can be a craft and can be a practice. But it's a way that we can reconnect to ourselves, to our own interior life, and also to our community. And as you're speaking about cleaning, I think, and having experienced some of this work with you, it really is a revival of the sense of craft and craftsmanship and doing something well just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Then I'm curious also, because you've been engaged in the craft of community building and reinstilling the spirit of the commons in your community. I know you have many different examples you can share about how that is going on for you right now. What's exciting you the most at the moment in terms of what you're engaged in and what you're seeing?
Well, I think what's exciting me the most is the way that so many threads are weaving together here in Peterborough. I feel like we're coming into a kind of renaissance of possibility in the community that is a result of an invitation to people to reconnect with their deep longings. And I just I resonate so deeply with what's been said in the introduction so far. I think what's wonderful about that for me is how much of it can be expressed through the smallest examples, the smallest encounters, the smallest moments that become the seeds of whole community initiatives in a way that no one would have designed or predicted. And the beginnings of that, I think, are, well, I want to jump back first of all to the time that we spent together on Wasson Island 2 years ago, and you know, I was lucky enough to be one of the people that you and Michelle invited to participate in your adventure there called the Wasson Dialogues on the Soul of Place, which was an embodied experience of so much of what you've been bringing forward in this webinar series. It was a demonstration of how, in a very short period of time, when the invitation is wide open to people to reconnect with their deepest selves, what results from that is a lasting bond and a reawakened sense of what's possible. We did that in Peterborough starting about 1.5 years ago with a particular initiative called the Peterborough Dialogues. It comes out of a media-making organization that was already quite unusual. It's called Axiom News. It was started by Peter Pula, and the principle behind it is it's an alternative form of journalism that asks not what's happening, but what's possible. It tells stories about what's emerging, what's just on the cusp of happening. The stories are meant to be transformative in the sense that they feed into a whole system and are meant to change the system. Out of that, there was a sense of wanting to reconnect with our own home place, and we put out an absurdly large visionary question. What if we could create a local living oasis in a global storm of shifting sands in our own community? What if we could reawaken our deepest gifts and possibilities in the service of local resilience and thriving? Now, who responds to that kind of an invitation? It's not people who are used to having a plan, who are used to doing something in a linear, structured way that projects particular outcomes. It's people who are dreaming of something more and better. The time we spent together, like our time on Wasson Island, was regenerative, and what's come out of it is a whole sequence of, you know, we spent our time together on being, not on doing, but the doing afterwards has been continuous. When you've connected with the possibilities in people and community on that level, you don't need a lot of time for preliminaries when you get together after that. You're so bonded. So we've got a group called Peterborough Pollinators that's spreading pollinator gardens, bringing health and habitat and beauty back to the community that's that's underway. We've got an initiative called Reimagine Peterborough that's about citizen leadership, not opposed to or inside existing structures, but alongside existing structures in reimagining the planning and engagement processes in our community. We've got groups that are reinvigorated in trying to bring about a different kind of schooling, nature immersed schooling that have used some of the process work that we've been introducing, a co-housing group that has reanimated itself through some of that, and there's this, you know, there's a sense that real collaboration is when the things that none of you knew were possible when you started the conversation are what comes out of the conversation, and you come into the conversation already believing in that. It's a flip of the usual way of going about things. I was listening to, re-listening to some of the earlier conversations in the series, and I had a great autocorrect moment. I typed "becoming native," and it got autocorrected to "becoming naive." Naive. I looked it up. I looked up its etymology, and what was given back to me was having a natural simplicity and honesty, and also being part of the nature of a person from birth, native or inborn. I think in escaping our linear mental structures and our engineered ways of doing things, we are rediscovering something of our true nature and something of what's possible in ourselves and in community.
It's a lovely thread to explore in one of our other broadcasts on regenerativity. You're exploring the awakening of the new mind is really what is at the core of regenerativity. It seems like the new mind may be more of the naivety of that new mind, which opens us to other forms of experience we may otherwise be close to or filter out in some way. That thread of naivety is also one to explore, I think, in the context of thrivability and also in the context of craft. Is there something that resonates for you there as well, Michelle and Tolu, in terms of how you think of your work?
All of it. All of it resonates, absolutely. Tolu, do you have something that jumps to mind?
Yes, I mean, I love, thank you, Ben. I love how you painted that. So many things came up for me. The idea of naivety and not knowing is very central to what I'm also seeing that is happening. The allowance for not knowing. You know, when I think of crafts, you know, you go into a craft, when we clean homes, we go into every session is a new session. You don't know what you're going to experience there, and you go in with that in mind. But we're beginning to see how can we actually apply that as a life practice. The idea of not knowing, but not knowing is really not a closure. It's an opening. It's an opening to mystery. It's an opening, like you said, to new possibilities. You know, and that can apply to anything. We can apply that to banking. We can apply that to, okay, how do we come to this profession as a craft, as though we knew nothing? You know, and what is going to emerge from that? You know, so thank you for that, Ben.
And what it brings up for me is the concept of stewardship and cultivation, that there's a not knowing, there's alongside that there's a listening for what's needed and being in service of that, listening to the voice of the whole organization, the whole ecosystem that is the organization or of the community. And I know in the last webinar, Michael, you talked about your experience in Aurelia, and it really sounded as if you all were listening to the place, listening to the community, and offering back what you heard, the voice of the whole, and the story that it had to tell, and the story that it had as the possibility for living into. That's been my experience in working with organizations and communities, that we can build this skill, this practice of listening for what's needed and trusting in the will and the wisdom of life, of the living systems that we're part of, and to grow into wise and compassionate stewards. And it is a practice. It's not something that you get trained in or that you accomplish and then check that off your list, but it's a life practice, like a spiritual practice or a martial arts practice.
That seems to be connected to how you build local economies too. If they're living economies, they're economies that grow out of listening into the needs of the community. Community thrives there. Yeah, Ben?
One of the things that's exciting me right now is I'm starting to see, actually coming from communities at an official level, a recognition that the quality of life, the livability in their cities is their economic development plan. Some of the work I've been doing lately has been on the London plan. It's a brand new official plan for the City of London that is the most visionary, I think, that's ever been created in Canada. It's not widely known yet. It's written in plain invitational language. It states straight out that the reason people will choose to live and to be part of an economy in London is because it's the place they want to live. It's the place they want to be. And that you do not have to market your community in a traditional way. You don't have to give the lowest tax incentives. If people want to live there, you're going to thrive. And that, there's a whole thread in that of you know, maybe like a lot of people, I've gone from a problem-oriented focus to a possibility-oriented focus, in stopping focusing so much on what are the huge things that we need to solve and becoming quite convinced that what will let us survive is actually exactly the same thing that we long for and that will let us thrive. I have a question I've written down here. What if our communities were made out of what we each did in response to our deepest longings?
That's the quality of listening deeply into the community. And letting
that inevitably then is place-based.
Very much, yeah. I was picking up on the theme of invitation as well. The extent to which we offer our communities as an invitation for others to come in. Just looking at how people enter into the community, what's their experience as they come into our city or into our town, and to what extent do they feel invited into this place? How do they feel welcomed in some way?
My community has, well, I mean, these are shifts that are so needed, and I don't want to convey the impression that they've happened in my community in Peterborough, Ontario. And you know, one of the things that's just happened here is that our very traditional city council has chosen to build a casino right at the entryway to the city, right beside our most precious natural area. And you know, these are, to me, that's an act of surrender of imagination, and of faith in our own capacity to create the economy and the community that we actually want. There's another project here that was one of the motivations for me in getting involved with Peterborough Dialogues and the various kinds of community building that we're doing. It's a long-standing proposal to build a large 1960s style road diagonally through the city, and right across the middle of our best park. These are things that you'd think wouldn't be happening anymore because it's 2016, but those proposals are still out there, and it's almost as if sometimes in the old style of thought, there's a sense of what is most precious to us, and then let's put that on the altar and destroy it to prove how much we want the gods of the old economy to come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a challenge to envision how do we create non-manufacturing new economies, and how do we create not continue to create large buildings that are unwelcoming and in some ways lifeless and uninhabitable. Yes. And that all seems to be part of the remnants of old economy thinking that we run into. Michelle, we've had some exciting conversations around how a theater in your community is trying to imagine itself as a catalyst for re-energizing and regenerating local economies. So it's not only arts or cultural building kind of as an island isolated in a larger sea, but in fact an integral part and a catalyst for transforming the surrounding environment as well.
It's just at the early stages, but it's a fascinating project. It's a theater that was built in the early 1920s, but has been abandoned and in disrepair for the last 20 years. But that means that people over a certain age, my age, all have a story of seeing Star Wars there, or going with their grandfather, or just some kind of a community story. It's in the heart of the community, alongside the major park in my area. And so it's being redeveloped, and the renovation and construction will take 2 years. But we're looking at these 2 years as an opportunity not only to engage the whole community in imagining how they love this theater to be, what experience they'd like to have within it, but how it can serve this neighborhood's unfolding story. So we're planning a series of community conversations to explore that. What does it represent now for those who have some experience of it in the past? What is our experience of this neighborhood, and how can a revitalized Empress Theater serve that unfolding story of the neighborhood? And there's just a lot of energy around it and excitement, and yeah, it's a great project.
Wonderful. Yeah, it seems that in a disenchanted world, our stories are the last refuge for beauty, for art, and for a sense of place, and
right,
a way in. Yeah. Tolu, do you have a sense when you're involved in cleaning that you're in a sense telling a story through the work of craft? It seems like my experience working with you in cleaning is that it reanimates spaces in a way and brings them back to life again.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's definitely telling a story. Like I've shared a lot about what cleaning is. Cleaning is revealing beauty. It's revealing potential. It's taking away what obstructs. Really, when you think about it at any level, it's taking away what obstructs and revealing what is true, what is beautiful, and what is sacred in place. So it's an act of creation. It's a craft, but it's not just external. It's not just something that I'm doing outside. It's also something that's happening to me. So it's a story that I'm fully involved in. So the cleaner, and which is what really attracted me to cleaning, and what made me think cleaning was not just the fact that it's a service, but that the experience of the cleaner is very powerful. So the cleaner, involved in this craft, I am being transformed. So the beauty that's being revealed is not just external, it's actually internal. So beauty is being revealed in me. I'm being transformed in the process of doing this. So I am telling a story, and it's a beautiful story. And the practice is making that a metaphor that applies to all of life. So even when we're looking at situations that are happening around us, how can we bring beauty out of it, even when we're looking at ugliness? You know, and when work becomes a craft and a practice like that, I feel like it becomes the response that we need to whatever is happening in the world. It becomes what is missing in the world. Whatever our work is, even if I'm a teacher, if I'm a carpenter, when it becomes a craft, my authentic response to whatever is happening in the world, even the negative news, is to continue to do my work because it's a craft and it's a practice.
Beautiful. If you're cleaning the external surfaces, you're also cleaning your interior surfaces as well. And it seems like nurturing our interior life is one of the ways that we are able to meet the complexities of our exterior or outer life as well. Yeah, wonderful connections. Devin, I think we may be at a time when we can open to questions or reflections from our attendees as well, or if you personally have something you'd like to bring in as a question or a line of inquiry for us to explore, feel welcome to do that too.
Yeah, so yes, I would like to just invite people to certainly share those questions with me in the question box, and I'll transfer those over to our group, our panelists. Nothing's come in quite yet, but I was just so enjoying your conversation, everyone, and I was thinking a lot about really the deep act of caring, especially with what Tolu is sharing with us about revealing beauty in the act of cleaning. And I was thinking about how, you know, the whole practice of it and the whole revealing and removing the obstruction, that's all an act of care towards place. And there's a lot of labor involved. It's so intentional. And I just love that thread through what everyone's sharing, just sort of holding that idea that Tolu was sharing with us and kind of threading it through all these other reflections. It's just so wonderful to be able to partner those ideas together. Thank you. So I guess not really a question, more of a reflection.
That's great, and that's what I'm inviting as well, as any reflections that bring in this way of continue to animate our conversation.
Hi, it's Sienna.
Hi, Sienna.
Hi, I'm really enjoying the conversation as well, and I find it so interesting because I remember in my first year of university in a social theory class learning about Marx and his theories of alienation, and I remember feeling like I understood the theory, but I didn't really understand how it applied sort of to real life and the impact that it could have. And this idea of being alienated from your work and being alienated from the people that you work with and the outcomes of your work. And it's interesting listening to this conversation and really seeing the impact of that. So when you're talking about, when you're talking about cleaning and how that can really impact your life and instilling the value of craft and being really connected to what we're doing every day and how that impacts our life and our connections to others and our community and how we view the world. And so it's really cool to be able to take what I've learned in an academic setting and see how that actually plays out in real life. So that's been really great for me over the last 45 minutes.
Oh, terrific.
Thank you, Sienna. Actually, Nicholas has shared a question with us. It was directed towards Ben, and we're just wondering if would you be able to repeat the question that seemed so inspiring about listening deeply? Nicholas is wondering that, Ben.
Sure.
Sure, thank you. What if our communities were made out of what we each did in response to our deepest longings?
It's beautiful. Mm-hmm.
I want to take what seems like a big leap to that, and I don't think it is, to what do we do when we're looking for a job, when we're talking about the economic development of our communities? It seems to me that question, if we asked that question instead of the question of what will pay, everything would change. It's sometimes even in places that are on the leading edge of new economy, the question of does this work matter doesn't get asked, and the real shift that I experience here lately in ways that just bring me alive is people who are choosing to try as much as they can to live inside the world they want to create.
Mm-hmm.
Love that.
There's something I've noticed over the years of talking about thrivability and what's possible. It seems that the old story told us that thriving and beauty weren't reasonable goals, that they're almost too much to ask for, and that busyness and productivity are their own rewards, and competing and consuming are enough. So there's some need for us to experience thriving in beauty, as you said, Ben, when we have a meaningful experience with other people in which we feel that we can express our deepest longings and we can be who we really are, we can be authentic together. Once we have a taste of that, then we almost can never go back, you know? So that's part of what excites me and about the movement, that I see that we're creating those moments, and it's hard to go back to accepting busyness and productivity as their own reward. We want more.
Yes.
We want to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sully, were you?
Yeah. So I mean, I agree with that, Michelle. It's like we cross a threshold into a new reality, you know, and that, I feel like that's kind of the invitation, and it's why sometimes it's hard for others to see this new reality. But once you cross over, and once you begin to see differently, sometimes I call it window cleaning, you know, because when you clean windows, it's you see better, you see truth, you see reality, and the dirt on the window is removed. When you see that, you never want to not have cleaned it, and you never want to go back to how things were. And it's a redefining, really, of everything. What's capital? You know, what's value? And really expanding that beyond just the previously narrow definitions, and beginning to touch on beauty and seeing love, for example, as a vital conversation to have even in a business environment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's beautiful. When I listen to you speak, Tolu, I think of every small act in a sense is filled, poignant with meaning and filled with metaphor. If we engage in our lived experience in that way, then we are continuously reanimating our relationship to place. And it's an opportunity. I think I've been thinking about the idea that what we are most nourished by are accidental encounters with art. You take art out of the buildings and bring it back into the community in different ways, and you create opportunities for accidental encounters. And I think that's in some way what we live for and are nourished by. And that if we nourish the longing, that the longing itself, in fact, seems to do the work. I was reflecting on that in relationship to what you're saying, Ben, nourishing the longing itself and letting the longing do the work. That the longing itself starts to draw things to us.
I have a piece of how that relates to that, how to actually go about doing this. And Tolu and Michael, you both used the word invitation. I'm reflecting on how my own work has changed over the last few years. It used to be about trying to design the perfect project, to see the path to how it would succeed, to convince others that it was the right way and it was worth their time. There's magic in inverting that into a question rather than a declaration. A what if that speaks to the possibility that calls to me personally the very most, and the small group that clusters together around that the very most. And if you put out the invitation into your project in the form of a question, that signal will be received by those who share the longing, and they'll arrive with their own full sense of possibility, rather than their rational doubts about a project that has not yet included them. So we've structured We've structured our processes here, the ones that have led to the things that I described in exactly that way, with a calling question.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You've also fed, you've cultivated what wants to come to life through your own storytelling along the way, and inviting others to tell their stories, what they've experienced. So it adds such fertilizer almost to, adds so much life to the unfolding then.
That's so powerful, and I want to credit Axiom News and Peter Pula and Michelle Strutzenberger and others for for revealing the power in that. And one of the things that's powerful about that, there's this principle in open space practice that we've all probably used at one time or another, that whoever comes is the right people. Sometimes the most powerful moments of emergence are at gatherings that almost no one came to. Where the Pollinators Project that has just actually in all 5 wards of our city, there will be pollinator gardens through a participatory budgeting process. That's an experiment in Peterborough. In all 5 wards, those projects emerged. That project was born with 3 people who were the last 3 to show up to a circle on local food that suddenly had the spark. The foundation of deep connection was there, and suddenly there was a spark of what to do. And it didn't need more than
A wonderful example of lowering our standards. Create a possible, actually, for life to live through us. Sometimes our standards are so high for what we expect needs to happen that we shut life down rather than open it up. Obviously, you're building fertile ground, building fertile soil through your stories and your acceptance for what is, and living with what's most immediately at hand. So many wonderful life lessons, and I think they're lessons around how we generate local economies that will thrive as long as they're sort of created out of alignment with how nature lives and how nature acts. And I'm listening into your language of fertility and pollination, and as Michelle, you were opening earlier in our conversation around how important language is, and how you've really wrapped language around your work totally in very beautiful ways that have elevated the act of cleaning into a transformative gesture. It lives, I think, through all of our conversations.
I want to credit Michelle specifically with your work on living systems in the life world, with making a conscious effort in me and the team, the whole team at Axiom News, to switch our metaphors from mechanical metaphors to life metaphors.
Wonderful. Great.
Yeah, too often the breadth of our language is the breadth of our world, and very often our language is too small for the world we want to create. So the limits of our language become the limits of our world. And I hope through these conversations, as I've been experiencing it today, is it really of opening up more language, a language perhaps of enchantment that comes from language in place, that opens up new possibilities for us just by the quality of the language that we're embracing and living into. Kevin, I'm opening up the space for any other reflections from yourself or Sienna or any of our attendees.
Yeah, Sienna, have you noticed any activity on Twitter maybe where people might have shared some questions on that platform? We could have a moment for that if there was any that came in.
We don't have any comments from Twitter right now, which is unusual because we've usually had lots of chatter on social media, but sometimes I find when people are really deep in thought.
I was going to say, I don't know about anyone else, but I've sort of just been on the edge of my seat. I haven't really been doing other things off the side of my desk, that's for sure. Yeah. But if I might share just a quick reflection, and maybe it might turn into a question for Michelle just as we move towards our close. The closing. I was thinking about, the language that you were just saying, Michael, and thinking about thrivability, and thinking about that framework in our communities, in our cities. And I was wondering, just sort of building on that idea, I kind of picture for myself, I picture, you know, the impossible weed coming through the cracks of the cement, right? And like this idea that something can still thrive against all of the odds. And what are the clues that we notice something's thriving? And are there things that you've noticed, Michelle, in a community where you're saying, okay, right, that community's thriving, and I can look to these clues? Because is it the arts? Is it music? Is it activity? I just wonder, just from your point of view, what those clues might be.
Well, there are some clues, and really this series of webinars has been all about those clues. There's been a webinar about homecoming, right? And whether people feel a sense of welcome and home, and whether they're able to bring their gifts. So is the infrastructure there, is the welcome there, is the culture in support of each person bringing the best of themselves and feeling deeply at home. The second factor that I look for is belonging. Is there infrastructure and interactions of sharing and transparency and learning and joy and playfulness together? What are the patterns of belonging between people and in different contexts? The third is generativity, is whether individual people come together in a sense of belonging and create something new that didn't exist before, create organizations, create community groups. What's the level of creativity in terms of generativity and regenerativity of a community or an organization? And is there a sense of unifying identity? Is there a story that helps them come together and recognize their own wholeness? And are there practices like Ben mentioned, the open space and other means of bringing people together? And the fourth is transformative celebration. Is there life that's honored and recognized, that's able to flow through? Is there trust and listening and stewardship as a culture, so that people can bring their deepest longings and they're able to be manifested? Or is it tightly controlled, as if it's a machine? So there's other language that I use that's more aligned with the science of living systems, but Michael and I have a lot of fun working with each other's language around these four patterns. And then the last thing I would say is most important is not what I think and what I observe, but the process of inviting a community to see these things for themselves and ask what more is possible in this moment, and how would we know that we are thriving, because they'll have their own answers and their own indicators of vital signs. And that process of learning to understand themselves together is so precious and useful.
Michelle, what an amazing story. Thank you so much for just going through those in such an intentional way. It was really, what a nice reflection to kind of think about at the end of this conversation.
Yeah, like recapitulation. We just have a few moments, I think, before we finish this morning.
Yeah.
Just for a closing reflection, do we?
I had a quick, if you don't mind, a very quick question that just came in again from Nicholas.
Sure.
Well, I'll read it out loud, and we'll see where we get to. And here it is. It's from Nicholas. I was recently at a training in Chihuahua, Mexico, and I was amazed by how people are using peace building as a method for placemaking. The situation there has been a violent reality for the past 10 years, yet they are creating a sense of place through their connections with peace rather than violence. My question to any of the panelists is if they have used conversation of peace in their work, and what kind of discussions have come out that perhaps have nurtured the conversation for better local economies. I'll just let anyone jump in on that question. It's such an amazing idea from Nicholas.
I'm going to suggest that we might just invite each of us to have a closing reflection, and you may include weaving this question around peacemaking as a part of your own reflection.
It's a great idea. Thank you, Michael.
Whoever would like to start?
Maybe I'll jump in, since I was the first to kick us off, and it ties into what I was just saying, the invitation to come together around peace is, it sort of responds to that third pattern of generativity. It's a unifying force. I don't have personal experience with it, but the art of hosting community that Ben referred to, there are others that explicitly have brought that into areas of conflict. So there's lots to learn, lots that's been shared online if you searched, or get in touch with me and I can connect you with some people who have that experience. But it's wonderful, really a wonderful example. I'd love to hear your, Nicholas, your experience as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Ben and Tolu, just a closing reflection?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's been amazing being on this session. And I like the idea of even closing with peacemaking. It's as though this is what we need in the world right now, peace. You know, and also looking at peacemaking as not just having a conversation, but even in our actions. You know, the idea of caring for a space is making peace. You know, is renewal, is restoration, is restorative. Mm-hmm. You know, and that creates a sense of belonging, because one thing about place and about home is that we want to care for it. You know, and caring for it creates a sense of ownership. It creates a sense of, this is my place, this is my city, because I care for it, because I'm contributing, because we're having these conversations that we deeply care about peace. And this conversation can be conversation in action, not just verbally. It's something we're doing together to care for this community, this place.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tolu. Ben, a closing thought?
Yeah, starting from peace, I'm just thinking about a song a choir I know sings that it's such a simple song, and it starts, peace, deep peace, peace will come, and let it begin with me. And the stages that Michelle listed off, those 4 stages, I guess the discovery for me has been they're not so much a plan as a description of what you experience when you come together in ways that deepen community, from homecoming to belonging to regenerativity to festival. One of the people who's been most involved in our work in Peterborough is someone who did 20 years of community building and then was hired as the citizen engagement staff person by the local police. What a brilliant move on their part. He understands in a deep way that community building is the best crime prevention strategy. It's the best. The community that we long to live in is the best economic development strategy. It's the best environmental protection strategy. It's alive with arts and culture. It solves many of our problems that can't actually be solved by engineering means in back rooms. I'm grateful to have been part of this conversation. I had a last thing, which is that poetry has been key in our process, and you know, David White and Mary Oliver and Emily Dickinson, and if you're really feeling brave, Rumi, and echoing a line from David White, that inside every person and every community is a great shout of joy waiting to be born.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ben. I will follow David White with a phrase from Plato. The world is indeed endowed with a soul and an intelligence, a single visible living entity containing all the other living entities, which by their nature are related. And I think that's been the exploration we've been having through these programs, of the question, what makes a place a place? Where do we find places endowed with this intelligence and soul? Places that hold our stories and places we consider to be our own ground of being. I think the likeliest path to the ultimate ground is through our own local ground. So in these dialogues, we've been exploring this vocation of place and the essence of placemaking. And I think the placemaking is itself peacemaking, because from my experience, any conversation I've been a part of about place has been a healing conversation. So I think in the process of just talking about place, we're making peace with one another and with the larger, more than human world, which we also need to make peace with. So these dialogues have been exploring the vocation of place and the essence of placemaking in this way, each offering stories and perspectives centered around the 4 timeless patterns that underlie the process of placemaking, patterns that inject life, energy, and soul into the body of community, patterns of homecoming, belonging, regenerativity, and transformative celebration, reveal the underlying flow of aliveness which, when made visible, contributes to a community sense of vitality and well-being. So thank you all for joining us in this adventure. My heartfelt gratitude to Michelle, Ben, and Tolu for joining me for today, and for all the panelists in the previous programs that have joined us in beginning to create these moments in time for exploring place and placemaking together. My deepest appreciation to Christy and to Devin and Sienna, who have been hosting our series, and very best wishes to you all. Thank you again, and hope we may meet again in the future. Devin, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks so much. And one quick recommendation that just came in from Ian White on Peace and Place, John O'Donoghue's Blessing for Love in a Time of Conflict, to bless the space between us. And I'll try and include that on our follow-up email to everybody so that we can check that out as a group. So just I'll run through a few quick closing statements here. Thank you again so much, Michael, Tolu, Michelle, and Ben, for sharing your insights and perspectives with us on the call today. Many thanks to all of you for joining us. Your comments and questions, Nicholas, Ian, Sienna, really helped make this a dynamic and thought-provoking conversation. We'd also like to thank our supporters, Human Resources and Social Development Canada, Maytree Foundation, J.W. McConnell Family Foundation, and the Province of Ontario for making these calls possible. As promised, in a few days, we'll email you with links to the audio, other material related to today's call, maybe reading recommendations. We'll also welcome your feedback on these calls, so please do email Tamarack to let us know how we're doing. A friendly reminder that this session will be posted on our online library at www.deepeningcommunity.ca. This website also includes relevant resources, fresh content from our thought leaders, and from the learning community. Finally, we have some other exciting events coming up that we'd encourage you to visit our website and look into them more deeply. You can learn more and sign up for our monthly e-magazine called Engage. Thanks so much, everyone. I really enjoyed today's call and hope to see you all soon.